What if I told you a company spent 20 years running one of the biggest frauds in history and almost no one stopped them? Not because nobody noticed, because every single time someone tried to expose them, the company won. Until one night, in June 2020, a man walked into his new office on his very first day at work and asked to see the money. It wasn't there. Almost 2 billion euros, gone. This is the dark reality of Wirecard. Let me take you back to the year 2000. A small German payments company is in serious trouble. Its systems have just crashed completely, caused, oddly enough, by an Austrian programmer who accidentally rerouted the entire company's internet traffic through his own personal computer. That same year, the company is nearly destroyed in a burglary at its offices. It should have died right there, forgotten. But a businessman named Paul Bauer-Schlichtigrol buys the wreckage for €500,000. He keeps the name, Wirecard, and he keeps 2 employees who will go on to become 2 of the most consequential men in modern corporate history. He hires a consultant from KPMG to be the new CEO. His name is Markus Braun, and he keeps that same Austrian hacker whose system crash nearly killed the company. His name is Jan Marsalek. Remember those 2 names, because in 20 years, one of them will be in a German prison cell, and the other will vanish off the face of the earth. Markus Braun did not look like a typical German finance executive. He wore a black turtleneck, constantly. He modeled himself quite openly on Steve Jobs. He spoke about Wirecard not as a payments company, but as the future of finance itself. Under his leadership, Wirecard found its first real business, processing payments for websites that traditional German banks refused to touch. Pornography, online gambling. It was lucrative, it was risky, and it was exactly the kind of business that conservative German banking culture wanted nothing to do with. Wirecard filled that gap, and it grew. In 2010, the United States government charged a German national connected to Wirecard with laundering at least $1.5 billion in gambling proceeds. Wirecard's stock plunged, and this is the moment that should have ended the company's story. Instead, Markus Braun made a decision that would define the next decade. He appointed Jan Marsalek as Chief Operating Officer. Jan Marsalek was unlike anyone else in German corporate life. Over the next several years, he pivoted Wirecard's business away from gambling and into something far more difficult to verify. He built an empire of payment processing across Asia and the Middle East. Dubai, Singapore, Manila, 3 obscure subsidiaries, operating in locations with no obvious signs of the massive business volumes they were supposedly handling. And yet, by 2015, those 3 companies alone were generating over €500 million in annual revenue. That revenue was almost all of Wirecard's profit. Think about that. The actual financial engine of one of Germany's most celebrated technology companies was sitting inside opaque shell operations in countries where almost nobody could check the books. Investors did not ask too many questions. Why would they? Wirecard's stock kept climbing. The company was added to the DAX, Germany's most prestigious stock index, in 2018. It briefly became more valuable than Deutsche Bank itself. But there were people asking questions, and they had been asking for years. As early as 2008, a German shareholder association flagged irregularities in Wirecard's balance sheet. Wirecard's response was to hire Ernst & Young to conduct a special audit. That audit cleared the company completely. Ernst & Young then became Wirecard's permanent auditor for the rest of its existence. In 2015, the Financial Times reported a significant gap between Wirecard's short-term assets and its liabilities. Almost nobody listened. Then in January 2019, a Financial Times journalist named Dan McCrum published something far more serious. Built on whistleblower testimony and thousands of leaked internal emails, it alleged systemic accounting fraud inside Wirecard's Asian operations. Wirecard's share price dropped nearly 40% within days. And then something almost unbelievable happened. Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, did not investigate Wirecard. It investigated the journalist. BaFin opened a criminal complaint against Dan McCrum himself, accusing him of market manipulation. And then it did something regulators almost never do. It banned short selling of Wirecard stock entirely. For 2 months, anyone betting against Wirecard was legally blocked from doing so. The very people trying to expose the truth were silenced by the German government itself. Why would a national regulator go to such lengths to protect one company? Because Wirecard was not just a business. It was a source of national pride. German diplomats promoted it abroad. The Chancellor's own office had lobbied on its behalf in China. Wirecard had become untouchable, not despite the warnings, but because of how loudly Germany had championed it. Singapore's regulators did something Germany refused to do. They raided Wirecard's Singapore offices. The contrast could not have been clearer. One country investigated the company, the other investigated the people trying to warn everyone. And then came June 2020. A new compliance executive named James Fries had just been hired to clean up Wirecard's internal controls. He was not even supposed to start until July 1st. But due to the chaos unfolding, he arrived early, on the evening of June 18th, and on his very first night at the company, something extraordinary happened. Fries discovered that Wirecard's claimed 1.9 billion euros, supposedly sitting safely in trustee accounts in the Philippines, likely did not exist at all. He worked through the entire night. By the morning, he informed the supervisory board. That same day, June 19th, Markus Braun resigned. Auditors from Ernst & Young confirmed the unthinkable. They could not verify the existence of 1.9 billion euros, a sum that represented a quarter of Wirecard's entire balance sheet. On June 25, 2020, Wirecard filed for insolvency. In 1 week, a DAX-listed company, a pillar of German finance, had completely collapsed. Around 50,000 shareholders lost a combined 24 billion euros. So how did they actually do it? How do you fake 1.9 billion euros without anyone catching it for almost 2 decades? The answer, when it came out, was almost cinematic. According to a forensic report later obtained by investigators, Jan Marsalek allegedly duped Ernst & Young's auditors using something close to Hollywood movie tricks. He reportedly hired actors in the Philippines, set up sham bank offices, staged entire fake operations, so that when auditors arrived to verify the missing billions, everything appeared completely legitimate. For years, an international accounting firm, one of the most respected auditors on the planet, was reportedly fooled by staged sets and hired performers. Markus Braun was arrested shortly after his resignation. He has now spent more than 5.5 years in custody, longer than almost any defendant in modern German corporate history, and his trial is still ongoing as of 2026. Braun insists he is innocent. He claims he was a victim of a criminal network led by Marsalek and another former executive, Oliver Bellenhaus, who ran Wirecard's secretive Dubai operations. But Jan Marsalek never faced trial at all, because Jan Marsalek vanished. He told colleagues he was flying to the Philippines to prove his innocence. Instead, he chartered a private jet under a false name, paid in cash, and flew to Minsk, Belarus. From there, investigators say he disappeared into Russia. And what came next reads less like a corporate fraud case and more like an actual espionage thriller. According to a joint investigation by Der Spiegel, ZDF, and the investigative outlet The Insider, Marsalek had been recruited by Russian military intelligence, the GRU, as far back as 2010. That reporting has not been confirmed by a German court. The very same year, by official record, he became Wirecard's chief operating officer. If the journalist reporting is accurate, then for a decade he lived a double life. By day, a celebrated Fintech executive at a DAX-listed company. By night, investigators allege he was helping launder money and facilitate payments connected to Russian intelligence and military operations, including the private military group Wagner, through companies linked to Wirecard. According to Financial Times reporting, he once showed visitors to his Munich villa what he claimed was the chemical formula for Novichok, the nerve agent used in the Salisbury poisoning in the United Kingdom. It was never independently verified, but it was the kind of thing he apparently liked people to believe. None of this was particularly hidden. Colleagues reportedly dismissed his behavior as eccentric. Regulators were too busy investigating journalists to notice. In 2017, he reportedly traveled to Syria, where journalists later alleged he met with Wagner Group units. He once joked to co-workers, "The problem with us Austrians is we always want world domination." After he vanished in 2020, investigators eventually tracked him to Russia, where journalists allege he was given a completely new identity, a Russian passport, investigators say, under the name of an actual Orthodox priest living in a small industrial city called Lipetsk, a man whose real identity belonged to someone else entirely. Marsalek, investigators allege, simply took it. In March 2025, a network of operatives in the United Kingdom was convicted at London's Old Bailey for conducting espionage on behalf of Russia. Prosecutors said the network had been run on Marsalek's instructions. Jan Marsalek has still never been caught. He remains, to this day, one of the most wanted fugitives on the entire continent of Europe. It is important to say clearly, Marsalek has never been formally charged with espionage in Germany. He is wanted there for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust. The spy allegations come from years of investigative journalism and from testimony heard in a British courtroom, not yet from a German indictment. But however the legal record eventually settles, one fact is already beyond dispute. For 10 years, the man running daily operations at one of Germany's most trusted financial companies was, by his own colleagues' account, living a double life that almost nobody around him fully understood. The human cost of Wirecard's collapse was enormous. 50,000 ordinary investors lost their savings almost overnight. Christopher Bauer, the company's former Asia manager and someone very close to Marsalek personally, was later found dead in Manila. In 2024, a Munich court ordered former board members, including Braun and the fugitive Marsalek, to personally pay 140 million euros in damages. And the investigation has continued expanding for years. In January 2026, a Singaporean court sentenced 2 men to 10 and 6.5 years in prison for falsifying account confirmations that helped sustain the fraud. The case remains, to this day, one of the largest accounting frauds in the history of post-war Germany. So what does the story of Wirecard actually teach us? It is tempting to think of corporate fraud as something cold. Spreadsheets, numbers, accountants in grey suits quietly moving decimal points. Wirecard was not that. Wirecard was a man in a black turtleneck who wanted to be the next Steve Jobs. It was a mysterious operative who may have been running intelligence operations for a foreign power while sitting on the executive board of a DAX company. It was staged movie sets built to fool the most respected auditors in the world. And for over a decade, almost everyone who was supposed to catch it, regulators, auditors, the financial press, either missed it, ignored it, or actively defended the company against the people trying to expose it, until one new employee, on his very first night on the job, simply asked to see the money and found that it was never there. The lesson of Wirecard is not just that people lie. It is that an entire system, built specifically to prevent exactly this kind of fraud, can fail completely, for almost 20 years, as long as the story being told is compelling enough, and the stock keeps going up. Markus Braun is still in a Munich courtroom today, fighting charges that could keep him in prison for the rest of his life. Jan Marsalek is still out there, somewhere, protected, untouchable, and the question that still haunts German finance to this day is simple. If it happened once, in plain sight, for 20 years, what is happening right now that nobody has caught yet?